Welcome to the Three Martini Lunch. Grab a stool next to Greg Columbus of Radio America and Jim Garrity of National Review. Three Martinis coming up.
Hey, really glad you're with us for the Wednesday edition of the Three Martini Lunch. We wish we had a good martini for you. We certainly don't. Even in our appetizer, Jim, it's very, very unsettling. Yesterday, a reporter from the Chicago Tribune, I wish I could remember who he was, mentioned that the Democrats, who are holding their convention at the United Center in Chicago, home of the Chicago Bulls and the Chicago Blackhawks. The Bulls have won 6 overall titles, 3 of them at the United Center. Blackhawks have won 3 Stanley Cups at the United Center. The Democrats have taken down the championship banners of the Chicago Bulls and the Chicago Blackhawks. In other words, I guess to make sure their balloons don't get stuck up there for Thursday night or something like that. My tweet to that was Greta Thunberg's gif of "How dare you?" I wanted to add the one about "You've stolen my dreams and my childhood," but the one thing I was hoping you would get to revel in this week, and no, we can't even have that.
Well, first of all, Greg, how likely was it that Democratic Party organizers looked at the banners and said, Chicago Blackhawks? It's a little awkward. That's a native tribe sports team. Are any of the hockey players actual Native Americans? No? Okay. Yeah, I got to take those down. And as for the Bulls, look, I think, they looked at it and Bernie Sanders probably said, that's too many championships for any one team to have. We need to redistribute the championships. So the old New Jersey Nets, you're going to get some. I know you're in Brooklyn now. You're getting a few more because it just isn't fair the way that, Celtics, Lakers, you're going to have to give some too.
And the Bulls probably reminds him of Wall Street, and he hates Wall Street and big banks. And so if Bernie Sanders had been the highlight for the Democrats last night, we'd be in a really good mood today because his speech was about as dystopian as you get. I loved how he bashed billionaires, and then they're like, and next, J.B. Pritzker.
Yes. Between that and the fact that the former CEO of American Express followed, I think that someone we have a deep cover mole somewhere in the Democratic National Committee organizing saying, two guys who really hate each other and stand for the exact opposite things. Let's put them right next to each other and see if anybody notices. We noticed, J.B. Pritzker bragging that he's a real billionaire and Donald Trump isn't. Right after, Sanders does his dystopian, the millionaires and the billionaires and the big banks are taking all your money and they're lighting cigars with burning $100 bills. The Hunger Games are coming, people. Howard Beale.
All right, well, let's talk about our first martini. Last night, the showcased speakers were Barack and Michelle Obama. First of all, this is not a big surprise. They're both really good at giving speeches. Barack, we've known this for a long time. Here's how he wrapped up last night, whipping the crowd into a frenzy to go win this thing.
If we knock on doors, if we make phone calls, if we talk to our friends, if we listen to our neighbors, if we work like we've never worked before, if we hold firm to our convictions, we will elect Kamala Harris as the next president of the United States and Tim Walz as the next vice president of the United States.
But in looking at the rest of the speech, Jim, he gave what you called a pro forma tribute to Joe Biden. One of the best decisions he ever made. Really? We're brothers now. I don't know about that. We got reports that Kamala wasn't there as a concession to Biden because he hates the Obamas now for shoving him out the door. I don't know if that means she'll skip the Pelosi speech tonight, but we'll find out. But Barack Obama actually said this last night.
At a time when the other party had turned into a cult of personality, we needed a leader who was steady and brought people together and was selfless enough to do the rarest thing there is in politics, putting his own ambition aside for the sake of the country.
Barack Obama denouncing a cult of personality? Mm-hmm. Really?
Yeah, that's like Michael Jackson calling you weird. Today's Washington Post column, I got to, briefly allude to the just utter mania of the 2008 election cycle, right? The Obama, Oprah chanting that he is the one, like Neo in the Matrix. The light worker column over in the it was San Francisco Gate, but it was the San Francisco Chronicle newspaper, I'm pretty sure. Obama girl, boy, there's something. I wonder where she is right now. Just this sheer mania, the degree to which, all the pictures that had a halo around his head indicating that he had, as I said, Barack Obama was the first man to step down into the Oval Office from his role as the munificent sun god. And I mention all this stuff in part because today's Morning Jolt, look, I think by any standard, Barack Obama and Michelle Obama as well, we're going to talk about her in a second, both blew the doors off the place. Phenomenal speeches. Now, doesn't mean I agree with the substance of the speeches, but I just think they went out there and did what they wanted to do, which was, remember about a month ago when Barack Obama literally ushered Biden off the stage? Last night he metaphorically did it with a little bit of a shove. Goodbye, Joe. Your time is over. And I think it was also very clear, both Hillary Clinton and Joe Biden were awkward successors to Barack Obama. Barack Obama, hope, change, youth, diversity, etc. Kamala Harris checks a lot more of those boxes. And he said, it's been a good convention for those of us with funny names who believe that anything could happen in America. This was the passing of the torch. And it was kind of a skipping over Hillary and Biden and kind of this, subtle acknowledgement. They were Democratic establishment before me. They weren't really the next best thing to me. There was this very much, this is a full-throated endorsement. And I think both Obamas did that about as well as humanly possible. And with that, so I wrote that. And of course, people are saying, Jim, you've always loved Barack Obama. The heck? Go back and check anything, But I do think that there is, look, first of all, if you're conservative, you're voting for Trump. Clearly, you're not the target audience. Clearly, that speech was not meant to persuade you. It was anybody who's not on board with Trump already, anybody who probably voted against him in the last two cycles or either of the last two cycles. And that's who it was meant to persuade. And I think it was really good at that. I think probably the Trump campaign and Republicans fool themselves if they walk around saying, last night's speech was terrible, nobody listened. I really think that the biggest problem for Democrats this morning, problem one is, first of all, remember we said Biden spoke late because they wanted him off the stage out of prime time? Well, Obama wasn't quite as late, but he still spoke late. So maybe it's just a thing where presidents and former presidents, nobody's allowed to speak in prime time anymore. Again, bad scheduling. In retrospect, I kind of sit there thinking, maybe it'd make more sense to have your top speaker speaking at 9 o'clock Eastern or certainly 10 o'clock. You basically, it's a very weird timing for this so far. And then secondly, are Tim Walz and Kamala Harris really going to be better than last night? Probably not. Yeah, we'll see. But I think the bar was set very clear, and they're probably going to be subpar compared to that. But look, this was messaging that was one designed to was it Rush used to say stir the erogenous zones of Democrat. This was meant to tickle them, but it was also targeted at the undecided, the independents, the folks who are not all that persuaded. And Barack Obama is just phenomenal at taking ideas that really aren't that centrist or common sense and making them sound centrist and common sense. And it's something Republicans largely underestimated for the duration of his presidency and his post-presidency. So I don't know how much the Obamas will be deployed as surrogates on the remainder. They've done a little bit of this for Biden, and a little bit of this for Hillary. I think they'll be more enthusiastic about doing this for Harris. And again, Republicans, do not underestimate what's coming this way.
Yeah, let's talk about a couple other Obama moments, because both he and Michelle talked about how awful it is that our politics are so divisive. We're so deadlocked and separated, and we can't
gonna put you all back in chains.
Yeah. There's not enough unity anymore. But listen to how Barack Obama talks about traditional or older Americans.
If a parent or grandparent occasionally says something that makes us cringe, we don't automatically assume they're bad people. We recognize that the world is moving fast, that they need time and maybe a little encouragement to catch up.
So they're always right, and anybody who has a more traditional view of how things are inevitably wrong, according to Barack Obama. Obama's got this thing where he always acts like he's above it all, even though he's always completely in the middle of the divisive activity. You mentioned how he kind of takes radical positions and makes them sound reasonable. He was the king of the straw man argument for anybody who disagrees with me is clearly disingenuous or radical themselves, and that's the only reason why they couldn't get on board. And even on racial issues, and we had several examples of that in the Obama years, Is there one instance where he didn't make it worse? Whether it's Skip Gates at Harvard, Trayvon Martin would look like my son if I had one, telling the people in Ferguson that, the grand jury was wrong not to indict the police officer, on and on and on. And he just always acts like, oh, it's everybody else that's divisive. It's not me. I'm not the one inflaming anything.
Greg, let me be clear. You're acting stupidly, much like the police in Cambridge. And I, as your munificent sun god, who have descended upon this earth to lead you to a better place, I understand you act this way because the world is changing quickly, and you're frightened by this. That's the Obama shtick, and that's one of the reasons it can be infuriating, because he would, at a Democratic rally, say, get in their faces, or write off rural Americans as bitter clingers to their guns and religion, all that stuff. He would do these things. And then he'd look at people who are in America being deeply divided. It's terrible how that happened. How did this happen, right? So more of the same. And also, you alluded to that. Notice how often he makes a comment like, well, we should all treat each other with respect. Almost like he's missed manners. Like it's about being polite. It's about being nice to people. Do unto others as you'd have it. But it turns into federal policy, right? Like these are not a matter of, we all should, treat each other with more respect. But, his vice president running around that Republicans want to bring back slavery, that's not nice. It's also lies. It's also, demagoguery. Mitt Romney gave people cancer, and, the double standard there. The idea that, when we demonize someone and when we demagogue, we're doing it for a good cause. We're doing it for the right reasons. The other guys demagogue for the wrong reasons, and that's what makes it wrong, which is, absolute nonsense.
That's exactly right. And the tell on Obama is whenever he stutters as he starts to get into what he thinks is it's a good line.
Yeah.
You're getting a pile of malarkey. As soon as he starts stuttering, you know exactly what's coming next.
Greg, you're using malarkey as a sign that Biden is still president. Actually, you know how you can tell the Democrats have moved on from the Biden presidency? All of a sudden, they're going after Donald Trump for who did what to stay out of Vietnam and calling him bone spurs.
Yes.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I forgot about the asthma that had somehow kept Biden out of Vietnam, but nonetheless didn't stop him from being, nearly on the college football team at Delaware and hitting, 900 home runs in one congressional softball game or whatever it was. Yeah. So, okay. Now Vietnam matters again. Okay. Yeah.
Speaking of the Bidens, Barack gave his pro forma tribute to the Bidens. Michelle didn't mention them at all. In fact, this is how she opened up her speech.
Something wonderfully magical is in the air, isn't it? We're feeling it here in this arena, but it's spreading all across this country we love. A familiar feeling that's been buried too deep for far too long. You know what I'm talking about. It's the contagious power of hope. America, hope is making a comeback.
Yeah, I didn't get the impression she thought that the hope came back 4 years ago. I think she thinks it came back about 4 or 5 weeks ago. That's about as big of a kick to the gut of the Bidens as you can get, especially when you don't even bother to say anything about them.
And Greg, we have some reason to understand that was not accidental. That was not an oversight. You don't just forget to mention the current president.
Oh, yeah.
Look, Michelle Obama was fairly close friends. I suppose she still is with Kathleen Buell, who is the ex-wife of Hunter Biden. And when she divorced Hunter Biden, apparently the entire Biden family just treated her as persona non grata, just basically exiled her from all family activities and things like that. Michelle Obama did not like that. And apparently that's one of the reasons that, until the switch over to Kamala Harris, Michelle Obama had been very quiet about the Biden reelection effort on her social media feeds and public speeches and stuff like that. I mean, it's not like she's anti-Biden. You just kind of like last night, you just wouldn't hear very much from her about this. And whatever you think of it, I standing by a friend and kind of giving a metaphorical middle finger to the incumbent president who was your husband's running mate. I kind of almost admire that. That's, that takes some guts. And I think what we saw, look, the Obama-Biden friendship There was somebody who wrote like a fictional mystery novel about them as like mismatched buddy cops. And I think they were hunting for the murderer of an Amtrak conductor or something. I almost admire the audacity of hope, the audacity in that. But there's always been this like happy narrative. And in fact, these are two guys with enormous egos who have been very sensitive to various snubs by one or the other. And, we have the infamous quote from Politico, Obama saying, "Don't underestimate Joe's ability to F this up." There's always been a sign that the Obamas never really thought that highly of Joe, or perhaps Jill for that matter. And that eventually that, subtle enmity would bubble up every now and then, generally kept under wraps in public. And I think what we saw last night was a pretty vivid demonstration of that the Obamas are relieved that the Biden era is coming to an end.
Jim, the last thing I'm going to mention, and I think Scott Jennings on CNN said it well last night, the Democrats really don't have a good explanation for why all these horrible things are happening to our country while Kamala Harris has been in the White House for the last 3.5 years. At some point, her record as vice president is going to go on trial. I'm sure they're trying to gloss over to the convention because she still has very few policy positions, although she has more, as we'll talk about in a moment. But they're trying to act like she's separate from what's happening right now, and I don't know how long you can get away with that. All right, Jim, on to our bad martinis. Double-fisted bad martini here. Kamala Harris is out with some more proposals. She's getting a little more specific, and they're not good. Americans for Tax Reform chronicling her $5 trillion list of tax hikes that she just endorsed, including raising the small business tax hike from 37% to 39.6%, bumping up the corporate tax rate from 21% to 28%. Boy, taxing corporations more, that's going to bring prices down. It always does. They don't ever pass that along to the consumer. Bumping up capital gains taxes to 44.6%, where if you factor that in with regular income taxes and state taxes, Californians, for example, will face a combined federal state rate of 59%. Then she wants a 25% minimum tax on unrealized gains of individuals with income and assets that exceed $100 million. So even if you haven't sold your house or your stocks or whatever it is, you're still going to get taxed on what you would have made if you had sold them. So that's not going very well. She wants a second death tax. She also wants a global minimum 21% tax on all businesses. On and on and on it goes. 30% federal excise tax on electricity used in cryptocurrency mining. $37 billion tax on American energy. Carried interest tax on capital gains. Just crippling to so many people if these were to actually be enacted. Hopefully, if she does win the election, she wouldn't have control of Congress. And if that weren't enough of an economic scare, the Bureau of Labor Statistics from the Labor Department today said that over the past year, 818,000 fewer jobs were created than initially reported. So, Jim, the current news is not good, and the future news, if she gets her way, is really not good.
Yeah, I had seen earlier in the week the claims that the Bureau of Labor Statistics was going to say, oh, by the way, we have overestimated the number of jobs created by 1 million. Okay, so it's not 1 million, but 818,000 is still bad, really bad. And boy, Greg, I mean, can you imagine how much we're going to see Kamala Harris and Tim Walz sweating when they get asked about this in the interviews they're doing and in the press conferences? Oh, that's right. They don't do any. They're never going to do any. They're not, to allude to an observation about Bernie Sanders' remarks last night. Just very quickly, it was like, we have done so much. Also, it's never been worse. Look at how terrible Americans are struggling. They can barely get by. The millionaires, the billionaires, the big banks. And then it came back to, we have done more in the last 3.5 years than any other president since FDR. Well, wait a second. Time out. Whoa. Don't you see any contradiction there? I mean, the obvious conclusion, we've done so much. Things have never been worse. What if you're not helping? What if it's not actually improving economic conditions in this country? And what if you're actually making things worse? Just put that in the back of your mind there, Bernie. But yeah, so like this, the jobs news is bad. And the notion that we're going to tax something that you have in theory, that you've gained, money you have gained in theory, but you don't actually have in your pocket. Like how are you supposed to pay that? Because you haven't sold your house to get those earnings. Fairfax County is absolutely convinced that my house gets more and more valuable each year in part because they want more tax money from me. And also because like my neighbors are selling their houses for money. That's nice, but it's only going to come into my pocket when I sell the house, which I don't intend to do for a very long time. And oh, by the way, unless I want to move to a much cheaper part of the country, any house I buy that's comparable is probably going to be of a comparable price. So I'm not gaining that money in any giant portion. But Kamala Harris wants to tax that. Now, I could see a lot of, fiscally minded Democrats, people who work in Wall Street, stuff like that, saying, look, this sounds bad, but it's never going to happen. Jonathan Martin had said when it came to the idea of price controls, stop panicking Republicans. You're being ridiculous. She's never going to get this through a Republican Senate. Well, one, we don't have a Republican Senate. We think we're getting a Republican Senate because of the Manchin retirement and stuff like that. But first of all, these polls in these Senate races do not look great for Republicans. And I can remember when things looked good in 2020. I'm like, oh, what are the odds that Republicans blow both Senate seats in Georgia? We got at least one of them in the runoff. What, is Trump and his allies going to go out and tell people not to vote because everything's rigged? Oh, yes, that's exactly what they did. We end up in that mess. So I don't know for certain. Secondly, remember, that Democratic caucus is not going to have Joe Manchin anymore. It's not going to have Kyrsten Sinema anymore. So two people who were very important, I'm not going to call them roadblocks, let's call them speed bumps to the left agenda, they're not going to be around. So the idea that Kamala Harris could get some very destructive ideas passed through the Senate doesn't seem crazy. We know how tight the margin is in the House. Maybe they got a Democratic House if she wins the presidency. So the idea that, none of these things will ever happen, that is not something you should be able to, rest easy upon. So this is someone who basically wants to absorb as much as much money as possible through taxes, and yet still claim that, I'm not going to raise any taxes on anybody making less than $400,000 a year. You're not going to raise income taxes on that. You're going to raise a whole bunch of other taxes that are going to hit people who are below that income threshold.
Yeah, it's a smoke and mirrors game, and the Democrats have been doing it for a very long time. I guess the good news is that she is putting out some specifics that a focused and articulate message countering that could potentially do a great deal of damage if there was a focused campaign to denounce those policies. All right, Jim, on to the crazy martini now. And it's possible that we could see a little bit of consolidation in the presidential race. Nicole Shanahan, who is the running mate for Robert F. Kennedy Jr. in his independent presidential bid, was doing an interview earlier this week, and she's obviously admitting that they're not going to win. And so she says there's basically two options of what you can do here. You can hope that you reach a certain threshold, and then you've established a new party and they get federal matching funds, and then this third party can grow and be competitive, hopefully, in future cycles. Or Robert F. Kennedy Jr. could drop out, essentially endorse Donald Trump, and then see what type of position might be available in a Trump administration. Well, it didn't take long for that idea to get to Trump, and he said on Tuesday, according to CNN, that he would certainly be open to Robert F. Kennedy Jr. playing a role in his administration if the independent candidate drops out and endorses him. I like him. I respect him. Trump told CNN's Kristen Holmes in an interview after a campaign stop in Michigan. He's a brilliant guy. He's a very smart guy. I've known him for a very long time. I didn't know he was thinking about getting out, but if he's thinking about getting out, certainly I'd be open to it. So we'll see if that actually happens. The idea that Robert F. Kennedy Jr. could be, critical to a Republican winning the White House, given where he's been on radical environmental policy and so many other issues over the years. But his campaign against censorship and his criticism of the FDA have certainly found some supporters on the right lately. So do you think it's going to happen? And do you think it's going to matter much if it does happen?
First of all, dear listeners, look at Greg slipping out the good Trump impression out of his back pocket when nobody was looking. That, people keep complimenting me on that. That was very, very good, Greg. Second of all, I was just thrilled to see proof of life of Nicole Shanahan. Since I periodically will just Google her name just to see, and she was doing a lot of interviews. I've never seen, there's saturation coverage of Trump. There's saturation coverage of Harris. I mean, no interviews and press conferences, but there's saturation. And a decent amount of coverage of Robert F. Kennedy. But man, it's like being in the witness protection program. Nobody was writing about Nicole Shanahan. And then she pops up and says, oh yeah, we might quit the race. It's a very, really. Third, look, if this were to pass, I think, and particularly if Robert F. Kennedy Jr. endorsed Trump, This would help Trump. This would shake up the race. This would help him regain momentum. Robert F. Kennedy's numbers have dropped pretty significantly since the switch from Biden to Harris. Some portion of his supporters were people who are probably usually vote Democrat, looked at decrepit Joe Biden and said, I just can't vote for that. And we're looking around for another option. Maybe they like the Kennedy name. Maybe they are indeed, skeptical of vaccines or something like that. Maybe it's kind of a protest vote. A chunk of those people have jumped on board with Kamala Harris. So I think if Kennedy just drops out and doesn't endorse anybody, I don't know if that does that much good for Trump. I think his voters they've had Trump as an option the whole time. I think if they were inclined to vote for Trump. But if Kennedy comes out and says, Trump is the best option we have, then I think that goes a long way. And I think that helps. And so because of this, Trump certainly sounded like he really wanted that endorsement. And my fear is that in order to get that endorsement, Trump would then say, I'm not even going to do the impression, you did it so well, but just to come out and say, I now oppose all vaccines, or I'm going to begin airstrikes on Pfizer, or some sort of just, over the top catering to the anti-vax crowd in order to that. And or I'm going to make Robert F. Kennedy Jr. Surgeon General or something like that would probably go very badly and probably alienate more voters than would actually get picked up by Robert F. Kennedy. But I suppose we'll see. But again, this doesn't sound. I could see this turning into Trump's next. This is going to win me the race. When in fact we're talking about. I mean, look, yes, these swing states are going to be very close. This could come down to a couple thousand votes, but I don't know. I'm coloring me a little bit skeptical that courting Robert F. Kennedy Jr. voters, the dwindling supply of them, represents the key to victory in 2024.
Jim, good luck braving the third day of the convention, and we'll do it again tomorrow morning.
See you tomorrow, Greg.
Jim Garrity, National Review. I'm Greg Corombos of Radio America. Thanks for being with us today. Be sure to subscribe to the podcast if you don't already. Tell your friends about it as well. Thanks also for your 5-star ratings and your kind reviews. Please keep those coming. Get us on your home devices. All you have to say is play 3 Martini Lunch Podcast. Follow us both on X. He's at Jim Garrity. I'm at Dateline_DC. Have a terrific Wednesday and join us again on Thursday for the next 3 Martini Lunch.